rupture and repair in counselling. Rory, introduce us to this topic.
Yes, and I think if we think of any relationship that we might have, be it with partners or our friends or at work or even in the therapy room, no relationship is perfectly attuned. You get misunderstandings or emotional intensity comes into relationships and it could create a relational strain. And I think the one thing I want to get over is ruptures are not a sign of failure. They're pretty normal part of therapy. And a rupture is where you're not tuned in to the client or the client isn't tuned in to you. And part of that is because they may see you as a figure from their past. So we've talked a lot about transference. The way you speak, the way you are, the way you look may remind them of a situation or a person from their past. They can see me as a representation of the people who'd caused them pain. And it's that point where clients can sometimes feel frightened, rejected, abandoned, or they can feel judged. And I also think when the therapist gets it wrong as well, someone might use the wrong name, for instance, or say something. And what can happen is that the rupture is so powerful that the client may withdraw from therapy or not come back. And I think it's really important that we understand our own attachment patterns, our own trauma patterns, and are able to see when the rupture happens and be able to repair it.
Thank you. I like how you've laid the foundation. I was thinking about this topic. Have you ever been in a situation where you're in a conversation with another person and suddenly they do something, say something, or act in a certain way where there's a little trigger that goes off in you? It's like a little red flag and you go, I've just seen something here. Almost like I can see who you really are, or I don't like that, or that doesn't align with me. So something where it doesn't align with your values or who you are or what you expected that person to be. And I wonder if you can think back to that situation where you may have just continued as normal, swallowed it down, held it inside, but yet inside you, maybe there was a slight difference in how you viewed that person going forward. And this is why this is so important. And when you were saying, Rory, about being in tune, because the attunement is recognizing it, but the client is not necessarily going to throw their hands up and go, you've just said, done, or asked about something that has tripped something up in me, and now there is a fracture, or now there is a rupture in this relationship. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's like you said, Rory, that they may just stop coming or just demonstrate different ways of being within the session that we can pick up. They give us little clues on that, Rory. What are the common types of a rupture that we might see?
Yeah, I think withdrawal is a classic one where someone withdraws, and withdrawal can be in the room. So people might sit back suddenly, pull back. It can be abrupt silence where someone just doesn't talk. It can be a defensive tone where someone's really defensive. Or it can be where you ask something or something happens and the person's too quick to attend to it. And also, clients changing the subject. A client may decide to go on a different path. They might be talking about some trauma that they've experienced, and all of a sudden they may be talking about the relationship with a friend. So all these are signs that at some level the client has withdrawn. And as a therapist, we need to be able to look at what's going on beneath, to be able to be attuned enough to think what's shifted here and to be able to speak about it in the room.
Yeah, I like it. And I think what's important to point out here is that recognizing fracture, rupture within the therapeutic session is not a bad thing. You haven't necessarily done something wrong. In fact, sometimes you may have done something right. I guess what we're called to do is the opposite of what we might do in polite conversation. We hope that the relationship is built to a point where the client trusts us enough to be able to share the information and say, yes, actually, I didn't like it when you said that because this means X, Y, and Z to me. Rory, I wonder if there's any thoughts you have on how we might voice this within the room so that it doesn't come across as an attack or disrespectful.
Yes, I think that you make a very good point, Ken, about in the outside world, we would just disconnect from a person if we felt uncomfortable. I think if we detect a rupture, we voice it, and it's how it's voiced. If someone moves the chair back, you wouldn't say, why have you moved the chair back from me? Don't you like me? What you might say is, I've just noticed that you pulled back a little. I wonder what's going on in the here and now. And what you're doing is you're inviting very gently the client to say, this is how I'm feeling. And then you can explore that with them. And I think that's really important. And there's one other very important thing that I think we need to talk about in rupture and repair is we need to understand our own processes, Ken. We absolutely need to know ourselves, because what can happen is that if the client withdraws, it may be that an old pattern of behavior comes up in us where we say, oh, they don't like us. I'm not going to work as hard with this client. And what happens is that the rupture becomes bigger and bigger, and it's impossible to repair. So that's why we're asked to have our own therapy during training, and we're asked to do personal development. And that's not just in terms of our first trainings, it's an ongoing quest to understand ourselves. So understand what's going on in us and have that little conversation very quickly, and then voice it. And it's the way it's voiced, and say, I can see that you look a little tense. That's my interpretation. Just tell me what's going on. And the client might say, it's what you said. You've said something, and that's really upset me. And then you explore that. And the key to this is that the repair gives the client a new relational experience. So what happens is that they may not have had somebody being curious about them and asking about them in their past. When I was a child therapist, one of my clients said to me, I've never had an adult apologize to me. Just let that sink in. I've never had an adult apologize to me. And in other words, the adult was always right and the child was always wrong. What does that do to a person? And that's the essence, that's the vitamin of therapy, that you could reach out to the other and say to them, just tell me what's going on. I really want to know. And you can start that conversation. And it's sometimes referred to as the experience, where you're seeing that person as a real, vivid piece of humanity sat in front of you, and you want to connect. And it also says to clients that the relationship can survive tension and that feelings can be named safely. Something that for some people, as I began to realize as a child therapist, doesn't always happen in childhood.
Yeah. And maybe within this rupture that there's a small element of conflict that shows itself. And I think that within the counseling relationship, you can model that conflict can be used productively and doesn't have to result in shouting or slamming doors. And you can model a different way of being. And you said a magic word when you were going through that, Rory, and I'm very grateful that you did. You used an example from working as a young people and child therapist and saying you apologized. And it was the first time they heard that. And that is really important. If we step on something inadvertently, so maybe we use immediacy within a moment, and we say, I really feel as you're saying that, X, Y, and Z. And suddenly we see that person shift. We see them stiffen up. We see them move their chair back. We see the expression harden on their face, because that's attentiveness. We're watching that. That is part of being there with them. Immediately, we've got to bring it into the room. I'm so sorry. I got that wrong. Just that. No excuses, no justification. I got that wrong. And then into the repairing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be really helpful. Some therapy is projected forward because a rupture is identified and repaired. The big danger you've already called it out, Rory, is when we are internalizing that as ourselves, when we're asking questions of ourselves and saying, is this me? Am I good enough? Can I really do this anymore? Do my clients like me anymore? And that's about self-work, but it is also about going to supervision and speaking about this. If these are feelings are coming up for you, take them into supervision and speak to your supervisor about them. If you experience any kind of a rupture within a relationship that you had to address, take it into supervision. Speak about how you addressed that and what the learnings were from that. Because I think there's great growth in facing a rupture and repairing it, Rory.
I agree. And wholeheartedly, I was quietly applauding, Ken, when you were saying about accountability. And I think that one of the things that repair does is deepen the therapeutic alliance. It's about trust and openness. And more importantly, clients can learn that relationships can withstand difficulty, leading to greater emotional resilience. One of the lessons that I would take away from being a child therapist was that a lot of the messages that we get about rupture and repair are cemented in childhood. And to be able to openly discuss when something's gone wrong or there's been a misattunement, and to be able to repair that rupture, I think is a great service for human beings, no matter how little you are. And it just builds more resilience, knowing that you can actually repair something when it's gone wrong. And I'd also say that supervision is really important.
Indeed. Wow. Rory's made a super duper handout for this. The title of the handout is called Rupture and Repair in Counselling Practice. And you can get this. It's free of charge. You can just download it.